Welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental issues that green up our world. Almost 3 million people in Michigan use water from private drinking water wells, and over 1 million Michigan homes have on-site sewage systems. That's a lot of potential for water contamination. Today we have Dave Dean, a specialist on these issues from the Environmental Health Department of Washtenaw County. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you work with the Environmental Health Division and the rural areas, right?
Correct. My title is Program Administrator for the rural programs at Washtenaw County Environmental Health.
Great.
Primarily focused in water supply and wastewater disposal issues.
Okay. And about how many homes in Washtenaw County have septic systems and wells?
We've done a little bit of research. Approximately 45,000 to 55,000 homes are on on-site water supply and or wastewater disposal systems.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a lot.
And I guess there's a county rule that the homes have to have their wells or septics inspected before they trade hands at time of sale.
Correct. Property transfer program.
Great. So we're going to be talking about that today, but first we're going to show a 5-minute movie because I think that it'll help get everybody on the same page in terms of what septic systems are.
Okay,
so
sounds
we'll
great.
watch that first.
Okay.
Over 40% of Michigan homes use septic systems to treat their household waste. These systems are underground, so are easy to ignore. But lack of proper care can result in costly problems that hurt our pocketbooks and our environment. Understanding your septic system is the first step to keeping it working properly. Here's how it works. When the wastewater from the house enters the tank, some of the solids settle to the bottom, and other waste such as oils and fats float to the top. Only the liquid from the middle zone leaves the tank for the drain field, where it flows through a series of pipes with openings that allow the water to percolate into gravel surrounding the pipes. As the wastewater moves into the gravel and the soil underneath, the contaminants in the sewage are filtered and treated with bacteria that occur naturally in the soil. Let's look at a few common myths. This family just paid $10,000 for their new septic system.
Now our system will last forever.
No way. The average life of a septic field is only 20 years.
But until then, we can use it without a care.
Actually, no. They must be treated carefully or they will fail even sooner.
What goes down our drains is gone for good.
Wrong again. Americans pump over 4 billion gallons of wastewater a day underground, and it doesn't just disappear. Septic systems connect to our environment. After being treated in our septic tanks and drain fields, wastewater re-enters our groundwater, streams, and lakes. Improperly treated household wastewater can contaminate our well water, swimming beaches, and wildlife habitat. Following a few simple guidelines will ensure your system works effectively. For instance, provide a barrier so vehicles don't drive or park over it. Compaction can remove the air spaces in the gravel, so critical to the percolation process. Tanks must be pumped regularly to remove the built-up sludge and scum layers. If there is not enough room in the tank for proper settling to occur, solids and fats can be pushed out before the tank can do its job. Solids that leave the tank can clog the pores between the stones. This will cause the drain field to become saturated and unable to treat the sewage, allowing contaminants to reach our environment and the system to back up.
Oh no.
It's really important to be careful what you put down your drain. Put fats in the trash so they don't clog up your system. Don't rely on your garbage disposal to get rid of food scraps. Compost or trash them instead. Gardens love your coffee grounds, but septics hate them. Drains aren't trash cans. These are some of the worst cloggers. Put them in your trash, not down your drain. And just because a label says it's flushable or biodegradable does not mean it's safe for septics. And septics do not remove chemicals. Take things like solvents, paints, and pesticides to your local household hazardous waste collection site. Septic systems also don't remove the chemicals in medicines, and these compounds are showing up in our lakes and streams, posing a danger to wildlife. so wrap and trash them instead. Phosphates are found in most dishwasher detergents and are not removed by septics. They end up in lakes and streams where they cause an overgrowth of algae, which fouls our beaches and removes vital oxygen from the water. Look for phosphate-free. As each gallon enters the tank, an equal amount is pushed out. The tank needs time to do its job properly, so don't use a lot of water-producing appliances all at once, and don't let water run unnecessarily. Until you need it, turn it off. And save up for full loads of laundry instead of lots of little ones. Buy low-flow toilets and replace old laundry machines, shower heads, faucets, and dishwashers with the new ones that follow today's water-saving standards. If you have a leaky faucet or toilet, fix it immediately. Even a slow leak can overwhelm your system. Watering over the drain field can also lead to saturation and septic system failure. Remember, it's all connected. For yourself and for future generations, please take good care of your septic system.
So we produced that movie about 10 years ago, and there's some things in it that we couldn't fit. For instance, sizing the systems. Do you have comments about that?
Yeah, the system sizing is that we use operates off the number of bedrooms in a home typically. So, and we permit for the home, not for the particular people who are building it. So that home's going to be there for a long time. So it's important that they get their proper size when they build, so that we have the right number of bedrooms we can size appropriately for the long haul.
So do you think it's in general better to err on the side of caution and build it a little bit bigger instead of having to pay for a failing system later?
Correct. It's we will encounter sometimes where there's a desire to downsize a home because they know it'll be a little bit bigger septic system. They'll say a 3-bedroom home rather when it's going to be a 4-bedroom. It doesn't pay to downsize it. It's better to have that system appropriately sized from the get-go. Okay.
And how about depth of the field?
Depth of the field is something that's very important for long-term function. Shallower, typically the better. Excessive cover smothers the field, prevents not only evaporation but seals off oxygen transfer into the system. So we like to see a field 2 feet or less cover.
And so if somebody's like landscaping and dumping on the field, it could be smothering,
correct,
choking out your...
That would be one of the more common causes of system malfunction over time.
And in the film, we say something about the systems usually last about 20 years. Is that still the case?
Yes, when the film was created, as you mentioned, 10 years ago, that was fairly early on in our time of sale program. We have used that program to gather more information as far as functionality of systems over the course of time, and we have found that for systems that have been permitted through our office, that you can bump that up to probably 30 plus years. It would be very standard.
Good. So the time of sale program started what year?
2000.
Okay, and you said that Washtenaw County had kind of a heads up because we were doing more permitting of septic systems even before that? Yes,
and actually we had been involved in our own style of time of sale before it became privatized. So we were doing these inspections as an office for the banks in the 80s. Okay. And then they terminated it. It went to private contractors. Okay. And then there were some problems that arose with transfers that occurred. There was no level playing field for these inspections. And ultimately, there was a need to level the playing field of what constituted an inspection, and that's how the program came about.
Okay, so the county has administered it and has rules as to what has to be inspected. Correct. And how, but the county itself doesn't do the inspections.
No,
okay. I get it. Yep. All right, so what are some of the things that could be found that need correction? For instance, illicit discharges. What does that mean?
Yes. An illicit discharge would be typically involving an older home that was perhaps built prior to any permitting requirements, which is prior to 1961. Okay. Those older homes oftentimes may have had just a straight pipe into a field tile or a road ditch.
Oh,
We do find those.
into a road ditch.
Yeah,
That's
or
awful.
even sometimes even a laundry separate discharge right onto the ground. So
Wow. And how about into like a creek or
Yeah.
a field?
surface
or-
water. Yeah, and when I say into a farm tile, oftentimes those are networks of tiles that ultimately wind up into a creek.
Oh,
Drains.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be some signs of a failing septic system?
Failing septic systems are characterized by slow draining system, where that's when a system backs up into the home. Another way it can manifest is the system will surface or become spongy in the ground. Might start off as kind of lush, greener grass growth and continue on to a puddle or ponded spot.
So first you think your grass is growing great and
Yeah.
everything is good, but then you realize it's not a good
Yeah,
sign.
Yeah, there's usually a little odor accompanying that to let you know.
Yeah, gosh. Let's see. So we need to talk about water wells as well. And one thing I noticed on the website, it says improperly abandoned wells. Now, what would that mean?
That's a very important topic. The general rule is a home has a well for every generation in it. When a well no longer becomes serviceable because perhaps the casing is rotting or what have you, a new well is drilled. But that old well must be plugged, typically with cement or a plugging type material, so that it doesn't become a drain into the aquifer. Otherwise, that well can short circuit contaminants into the groundwater aquifer, which otherwise may have taken centuries for the water to filter and get through to that formation.
So you want a closed
You
system.
want to close that so it's
Yeah.
not a drain, so
Yeah.
it doesn't contaminate. It's a large issue throughout Michigan.
Huh.
A lot of these wells.
You said that one time you went out and inspected and there was a old well next to a new well, and the old well had cracks in the casing or
The old
something?
well had entirely rotted out, basically at the floor of the foundation, and it was a wet. I don't know if you can be able to show the picture here, but it's a wet ground basement area, and there's a lot of water accumulating and dirt and that, and it's an open conduit. You can see that it's actually serving as a drain on that basement.
So what are some of the things that we want to keep out of wells?
Well, you want to keep insects out. That's what there's usually a tight-fitting lid in there. We want to keep any flooding out of there. That's why there's a minimum height requirement above grade, or that it's in a drained area.
Let's back up. Insects, why? Because they create bacteria or
Insects,
something?
yes, can contribute bacterial contamination into the supply.
Okay. And then flooding would be because you could get stuff running off of surfaces that,
Correct.
like
If you have-
petroleum byproducts or
Yeah.
whatever.
It kind of helps to know a little bit on the construction history of wells, because old wells were, to keep them from freezing, they were built below ground in what we call well pits. And they took the line into the home below ground so they didn't freeze. That's changed in the 60s, where they have what's now called a pitless adapter, and that well terminates above grade where it's not subject to flooding. But those old well pits often terminated in depressed areas and can be flooded and contaminate a well.
Well, we certainly want to keep bad things out of our water. There's also problems with arsenic, you said.
Correct. It's we've found through sampling that we get it in around the 15% of the wells that we have in the county since we've sampled our test for elevated arsenic. It's naturally
That's a
occurring.
lot, 15%, wow. But there's there's filters and things?
There are treatment elements that can be done for the lower level elevations. That's in the 10 to 49 parts per billion. We will treat arsenic at that level. When we're over 50 parts per billion, we then consider we need to find another water source for that well to be considered potable.
And nitrates, now those are from, like, say, old farms or such?
Nitrates are not a naturally occurring contaminant typically. They are from human activities, whether it be farming, fertilizing, and or septic systems.
Okay, huh. So, and what about venting? I read that improperly vented. Where do you put a vent on a well?
A well, bear in mind that a typical modern well construction has a pump in the bottom of the well. So a vent, there is a need to have a vent on that well because when you kick that pump on, it's going to draw the water down, and it needs an air vacuum
I
brake
see.
to equalize the pressure. So the
Oh.
vent is at the top of the well, but it needs to be screened. It needs to be kept in,
Keep those critters out.
yep, kept in a sanitary condition. Yep.
And how about isolation distances? You need the well far away from like your septic and
Septic tanks, drain field, tanks, drain fields, sewer lines, buried fuel tanks, above ground fuel tanks as well, although if they're leaking, we typically can tell that pretty quickly. Farm lot, feedlots, agricultural operations like
could
that.
mean a lot of different things you got to
Yeah.
keep away from.
Yeah.
I grew up in an old place outside of Kalamazoo, and there was an old gas tank right on the property where I guess they filled up the tractors.
Right.
And thinking back now, it was right next to our well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, kind of scary.
Those tanks, old tanks were notoriously leaky over
Gosh.
time. Soil typically was
Who knows
corrosive
what we were
environment.
drinking?
Yeah, exactly.
So the timing of all this, when should people have the inspectors come in and look?
We advocate that they have their time of sale inspection performed or arranged either prior to or at the time of they want to list their home. That way they can really avoid having complications with timing issues to get the property closed. If there were problems arose, those can be dealt with before there's any closing date and that sort of thing. Otherwise, we get into situations where, hey, we were closing on Friday and we still have a problem we got to resolve. So,
But the house sale can still go through as long as there's an agreement that the corrections will
the
be
house
made?
sale can go through so long as we have a corrective action resolved. If there's going to be a permit, the permit is written, that permit gets bids on it, and that bid gets converted into a contract for the work to be done.
Okay.
And that 1.5 times that contract amount is escrowed for the work to be completed during the course of the next 6 months.
So do other counties have this in Michigan, these time of sale things?
Yes, there are, I believe, at least 7 other jurisdictions in the state that have them, and there's interest in more. There's
Seems
even
like a great program.
There's even a single township in one of the counties that has a program. So yeah, it's a growing, it's a recognized growing need.
Our drinking water is so important, and not just for our humans, but for the wildlife too. We need clean water.
And bear in mind that the older construction techniques lent themselves to having to being prone to contamination. So even if a well were yielding good water one day, the way it's constructed, it can become contaminated very quickly. So it's typically targets some of those older antiquated water systems is what we get corrected through this program.
Okay. And so about how many a year over the 10 years, over a 10-year period?
Yeah. How many corrective actions that
Yeah.
we? In my last review was we had over 1,000 corrective, required corrective actions in both water supply and wastewater disposal over the last 10 years in the properties through this program. We've talked about that number as being at about 130 of each per year. That's kind of a general average. We're running about 1,000, 1,100 inspections come through our office every year.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Really appreciate this good work that you're doing to
Thank
protect
you.
our water. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Keep
And thanks
sending-
for being here today. Oh, but before we go, we have to talk about resources.
Yes.
Very important. Almost forgot. How can people get more information?
We've talked about an easy way is the Google Washtenaw County Septic, and that will get you right to our web page. Then you don't have to go into all the URLs of that.
And to get more information about home toxics, which we talked about in the movie,
Yes.
the Washtenaw County has great programs for collecting household hazardous waste,
Correct.
and they can get that through that same
That
set
same,
of.
you would back out a space or two in that website, and there would
Okay.
be a home toxics page in there.
And you mentioned the map Washtenaw.
Map Washtenaw is a great resource to show property history, aerial photos, layers such as topography, political jurisdictions, property ownership, and all that sort of information can be gathered out of that map Washtenaw.
Sounds like a treasure trove.
And I will like to say that we're in the process of trying to add some of our environmental layers, water supply and wastewater system
that'd be
component
great.
locations into that ultimately.
And you can get well and septic records of
Yeah.
previous.
Again, off the main website, you can access the tab that says well and septic records, It has a complete history of the inspection records that were contained for that particular property that you're interested in.
So everything you ever wanted to know about your property or prospective properties.
Correct. We
Information.
encourage that you do, if you're interested in a property, you encourage that you do research
into it,
so
yeah.
that you know,
Great.
what you may be getting into. Due diligence.
Wonderful. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much for being here today, Dave. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
For an online archive of all our Green Room shows, go to ewashtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.